Good morning, good day, and good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all races, ages, genders, sexual orientations, religions, etc. The position of the President of the United States is one that comes with great responsibility. It is one that 45 different men have served since the idea began in 1789. Many have been praised for their actions, while others have been criticized, even despised by the American people. Unfortunately, there have been presidents whose terms got cut short. Not due to resignation, in which case there's only been one, but due to their passing at the hands of individuals who took matters into their own hands by assassinating them. These individuals, for one reason or another, decided to make a countrywide decision to take the life of a sitting president that changed the course of history, with consequences their selfish minds did not think of. With that in mind, one may ask, which presidents were assassinated? And what was the reasoning behind it? Well, one of the two more well-known presidents to be assassinated was also the first. He was the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's presidency was one of great accomplishment, and some may argue, one of great controversy. Prior to Lincoln's election as president, many southern states compiled a series of formal declarations and conventions in December 1860 to leave the Union. They feared Lincoln's election would threaten their slave-dependent economy and lead to the abolishment of slavery. Shortly after Lincoln's election, each state held a special convention where delegates voted to leave the United States, citing the protection of slavery, states' rights, and opposition to federal policies as their primary reasons. South Carolina, which was the first state to secede, brought forth a declaration specifically pointed to Northern hostility towards slavery and the election of Lincoln, whom they viewed as a threat to their way of life and economic interests. Following South Carolina, 6 other southern states, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, held similar conventions and declared secession in early 1861. These states would later form the Confederate States of America, adopting a new constitution and electing Jefferson Davis as president. Upon Lincoln's inauguration on the 4th of March, 1861, Lincoln issued a warning to the southern states of his willingness to use force to defend federal law and the Union. After the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter on the 12th of April, 1861, and just over a month after he took office, the American Civil War began. Following Lincoln's call for troops, 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee, joined the Confederacy, bringing the total to 11 seceded states. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln's primary goal was to preserve the Union. Over time, this goal evolved to also include the abolishment of slavery. This became more evident with the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation on the 1st of January, 1863, and support for the 13th Amendment. The Civil War would unofficially end on the 9th of April, 1865. The Union Army would celebrate in victory while the Confederacy fought against the dissolution of their way of life. With the war waning down, Lincoln began preparation for reconstruction of the country. This included the 10% Plan, which was a strategy to reintegrate the Confederate States back into the Union. Only 10% of a state's voters were needed to take an oath of loyalty to the United States and accept the abolition of slavery to form a new state government and rejoin the Union. While many in the South did not take too kindly to these actions, one individual took it to an extreme. That individual was John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and Confederate sympathizer. Booth viewed Lincoln as a tyrant, particularly for Lincoln's plan for post-war Reconstruction and the promotion of black rights. After the Confederacy's defeat became more certain, Booth abandoned earlier plans to kidnap Lincoln and instead organized a plot to assassinate Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Secretary of State William Seward in an attempt to destabilize the federal government. He got his chance on the night of the 14th of April, 1865. He entered Ford's Theater, likely recognized and unchallenged due to his fame as an actor and his familiarity with the theater, which he performed at several times. Lincoln was accompanied by his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and two guests, Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris, in the president box on the upper floor of the theater. Booth would make his way up to the upper floor and shot Lincoln in the back of the head during a performance of the play Our American Cousin. Booth would escape following the assassination. Lincoln would be moved to a nearby house on 10th Street as a carriage ride to the White House was too dangerous. Lincoln passed away the following morning. Booth was later caught after being on the run for 12 days. He was shot and killed by Union soldiers. Minor battles and surrenders of the Civil War continued to wage on until November 1865. One of the two lesser-known assassinations was that of the 20th President of the United States, James A. Garfield. Garfield was a Civil War veteran, having opposed the Confederate States' secession, and was a major general in the Union Army. Following the war, there was political turmoil, especially following the assassination of President Lincoln and the appointment of Vice President turned President Andrew Johnson. While Garfield was for the advancement of newly freed slaves, Johnson sought the rapid restoration of the Southern states. Garfield would see and influence both impeachment proceedings of Johnson, though they were unsuccessful. Garfield would see the presidencies of Union Army officer Ulysses S. Grant and Rutherford B. Hayes, before finally becoming president himself on the 4th of March, 1881. As president, Garfield sought to strengthen federal authority and combat political corruption, notably challenging Senator Roscoe Conkling over patronage appointments, which led to a significant political shutdown. Charles Guiteau, an American poet, activist, and failed lawyer, believed he was owed a prominent government position. One of particular interest to him was a consulship in Paris, as he gave a speech he had written in support of Garfield's 1880 presidential campaign. Through numerous failed attempts to convince the administration to give him an appointment, he became enraged, bitter, and sought revenge. On the 2nd of July, 1881, Garfield arrived at the Baltimore Potomac Railroad station for his summer vacation, something that was reported in the Washington newspapers. Having news of this, Guiteau waited at the station, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Guiteau would get his opportunity when Garfield entered the station's waiting room. He shot Garfield twice from behind at point-blank range. He hid his weapon and attempted to escape via a cab he had waiting for him, though he was quickly apprehended before he got the chance to flee the scene. Garfield would survive the encounter and was treated for his injuries. Despite this, he would have periods of fevers and struggling to keep down solid food, and he spent most of his summer eating only liquids. On the 9th of September, 1881, President Garfield would pass away only 6 months into his term. It was later determined that Garfield passed away due to infection from his injuries. Guiteau was found guilty by the Supreme Court on the 25th of January, 1882, and sentenced to death. He was hanged 5 days later. The other lesser-known president to be assassinated, though arguably more well-known than the previous, was William McKinley, who served as the 25th President of the United States. Like his predecessors in the video, he was aligned with the Union Army during the Civil War. Following the war, McKinley would practice law, having been admitted to the bar in Ohio. He became successful enough to move himself into politics. He would meet and campaign with fellow Union officers, which eventually led him to becoming a member of Congress. Simultaneously, Rutherford B. Hayes would be elected as the 19th President of the United States and took office in 1877. With his move into politics, McKinley would earn half of what he was making practicing law. McKinley would serve in various political roles for nearly 2 decades before deciding to run for president. He would win the 1896 election and was sworn in 1897. Following his 1896 victory, McKinley made a promise for sound money. He delivered on this promise by securing a passage of the Gold Standard Act of 1900, which formally established gold as the only standard for redeeming paper money, calming financial markets, and securing the support of the business class. Other prominent achievements during his tenure as president are setting the highest protective tariff rates in the United States history up to that time, rapid growth of the economy and a sharp drop in unemployment, and McKinley's foreign policy marking the true emergence of the United States as a global power through the Spanish-American War, the 100-Day War, the acquisition of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines from Spain, the annexation of Hawaii in 1898, and the open door policy in China. One of McKinley's biggest blunders as president was his administration's response and handling of racial violence, which was minimal. Despite McKinley's opposition to lynchings and appointment of black people to low-level government posts, his indifference caused him to lose black support. Furthermore, despite his opposition to lynchings, McKinley's administration failed to pass any federal anti-lynching legislation. Because the violent act was classified as local murder cases, both Democrats and many Republicans held the belief that the Constitution gave the federal government no authority to intervene. This would lead to the Wilmington Insurrection in 1898. McKinley refused to send federal troops or even publicly acknowledge the violence. Historians believe this was due to his fear that intervention would incite further conflict against black Southerners and his need for support from white Southerners in Congress to advance his key foreign policy agenda. Though controversial in his role as president, McKinley would win re-election and set his sights on another term. With the rise of anarchists in the world, particularly in Europe, McKinley's security warned him of meeting citizens of the public. One such anarchist was Leon Zalgaz, a former wire worker who lost his job during the Panic of 1893. He turned to anarchy following other workers going on strike from losing their jobs. He viewed McKinley as a symbol of oppression and was convinced that it was his duty as an anarchist to kill him. In the afternoon of the 6th of September, 1901, McKinley would attend the Temple of Music in Buffalo, New York. This was something that his security twice tried to remove from McKinley's rescheduled visit, but the president refused not to go. He would meet and shake hands with people in attendance. Zalgaz just so happened to be one of them. As the two shook hands, Zalgaz pulled out his weapon and shot McKinley twice in the abdomen. With yet another shooting of a sitting president, Zalgaz was tackled and beaten for his actions. He was taken away and held in a cell. McKinley would survive the attack, though he was wounded by one of the bullets. He was taken to the Exposition Hospital, though he was in the hands of inexperienced doctors, as those who were qualified were not available. Though using obsolete surgical instruments and techniques, the doctors were able to save McKinley, or so they thought. Though McKinley would appear to recover from the incident, his health rapidly deteriorated, losing his appetite and fading in and out of consciousness. On the 14th of September, 1901, President McKinley would pass away from gangrene. Leon Zalgaz was tried by the Supreme Court of the state of New York and found guilty of murder, which only took 2 days to conclude. He was electrocuted at the Auburn State Prison on the 29th of October, 1901. McKinley's death marked the third president to be assassinated in less than 40 years. The final, most recent, and arguably most well-known assassination of a U.S. president was the 35th president of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Like the previous presidents before him, Kennedy would serve in the military. This time, it was during the Second World War. He commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy Reserve in 1941. He would serve during the war before entering into journalism in 1945. He covered the Potsdam Conference toward the conclusion of the war. Kennedy would get himself into politics following the war, with his first role being a member of the House of Representatives in 1946. During his tenure, Kennedy focused on local issues important to his constituents, such as public housing, Social Security, and Veterans Affairs. Kennedy also focused on foreign policy as he was an early supporter of Cold War efforts, like the Marshall Plan, but was critical of the Truman administration's perceived failure to contain communism in Asia. Kennedy would later move his political career to being a member of the Senate. He beat popular Republican Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. to take over the seat of Massachusetts. In the Senate, Kennedy served on numerous key committees. One such committee that elevated his profile was the McKinley Committee, which investigated labor racketeering and corruption. With a combination of war heroism, intellectualism, wealth, a large political family, and a powerful state political machine, Kennedy would set his sights on presidential candidacy. On the 2nd of January, 1960, Kennedy would announce his Democratic candidacy for president. Despite his youth and experience, Kennedy was able to win supporters over with his charisma and eloquence. He was able to make himself look more of a potential candidate for presidency during his debate with Vice President Richard Nixon. During the election, Kennedy would narrowly defeat Nixon in one of the closest elections of the 20th century. He would become the youngest elected president of the United States at the age of 43. Taking office in 1961, John F. Kennedy focused on many points of interest. The most notable to point out were the New Frontier. Kennedy pushed for civil rights measures, federal aid for education, expanded social programs, and launched the ambitious goal to land a man on the moon. Foreign policy during the Cold War. The Bay of Pigs invasion of 1961 was a failed CIA-backed attempt to topple Prime Minister Fidel Castro. Additionally, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis brought the US and the USSR to the brink of nuclear war, though thankfully it ended with a negotiated Soviet withdrawal of missiles from Cuba. Global influence. Kennedy strengthened U.S. commitments in Vietnam with military advisors and troop increases, supported anti-communist alliances in Europe, including visits to Berlin, and used televised speeches and charisma to shape public opinion. While seeking re-election, Kennedy traveled across the United States to gain more support for his campaign, as well as uniting the Democratic Party. Texas was one state where the Democratic Party was met with hostility. Kennedy attempted to pacify the state. In the same state was a man by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who indulged himself in Marxist ideology at a young age. In the Marine Corps, he was court-martialed and demoted twice for various actions. He gained Soviet citizenship in January 1960 for work in Belarus. He returned to the United States in 1962, settling in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for another occupation. On the morning of the 22nd of November, 1963, Oswald would go to work with his co-workers making note of a package he had with him. He said he was carrying iron curtains, but he was really talking about a different kind of iron. He would later begin making preparations for taking the life of John F. Kennedy, who was riding in an open Lincoln Continental convertible within a motorcade. As they rode through Dealey Plaza, Kennedy was shot twice, the second one being critical at 12:30. He was taken to the Parkland Memorial Hospital where, despite his living condition, survival was impossible. He was pronounced dead at 1300, 30 minutes after he was shot. Oswald escaped the Texas School Book Depository where he worked and shot Kennedy. He escaped to a theater where witnesses made note of him. He was apprehended and arrested just over an hour after he shot the president. He was charged with the assassination, but 2 days later, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot and killed Oswald. While his motives are speculated to this day, the reasoning behind his assassination of the president remains unknown. Thank you for watching this video. Like my previous video, this one was inspired by my knowledge of historical events that took place during the month of November. While Kennedy's death was the only one of the presidents that occurred in November, I wanted to do something new and talk about multiple people this time around. I haven't done that since my Emmett Till and Chadwick Boseman video. Rest in peace to both of them. This video also gave me an opportunity to learn more about the circumstances of the presidents whose lives were cut short. Obviously, Kennedy and Lincoln were the more well-known presidents who were assassinated, but the other two were less known. Garfield, due to his short presidency, which some argue would have saw positive change. And McKinley, he was just largely forgotten about. Hopefully we do not see another president meet an end like these men have. I'm sure with the extra security and advancement in technology that we won't be seeing that happen again for a very long time. I can't say never though, because this world is ever changing, and as sad as it may sound, as long as man is on this planet, there will always be war and conflict. Now, that is not an excuse for anyone to go crazy or try anything stupid. Just my spare change of thoughts. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Make good decisions. And have a wonderful rest of your day.